obviously here in our audience. Who knows Invest Ottawa? How many hands? A few hands. Wonderful, wonderful. We have a great audience, and I know that we are bringing folks online as well. A little bit of background about I.O. We are really here to collaborate with you to create the jobs, community, and economy of the future together. We do that in 5 ways. We help entrepreneurs and companies like BluWave-ai and so many others across our ecosystem launch, grow, and scale from early stage ideation, I'm scribbling on a napkin, to 100 million in revenue. We help to attract companies, investment, and talent in from around the world, specifically Europe, Asia Pacific region, and the Americas, to build up our ecosystem and make it even stronger. To help attract and retain the top talent, companies like BluWave and many others need to remain competitive and to take on the world. Here at Bayview Yards, I say innovation birds of a feather flock together to pursue shared goals that no one individual or organization can achieve in isolation. We pursue education, celebration, and collaboration here inside these 4 walls, but its magic is the collaboration that happens with people like you. And Area X.0, our R&D complex for next-gen smart mobility, autonomy, and connectivity, where we help accelerate testing, validation, and demonstration of high-potential technologies. So really, we are here for you to help support every step of the business journey, and we do that together as a collaborative community. Ottawa is a global tech hub. I need to say that as well, because as we undertake this important topic today, we are bringing our technology strengths to bear, and so together with those around the country and those around the world. So we are collaborative. We want to share what we have to offer and bring these technologies to market so that we can have that incredible impact on the world. A few tech stats, since there seems to be an appetite for this in our audience. We have the top tech talent concentration in all of North America, 13.3% of our total workforce, ahead of Silicon Valley, Toronto, Montreal, and other hubs across North America. Incredible, incredible opportunity and talent base. We have 168,000 students at our 4 post-secondary institutions, including 28,000 in STEM. That is the future pipeline and the talent that we need to continue growing this talent base and this talent hub. 1,800 plus companies and 94,000 tech workers across our public and private sector, and strengths that span software, AI, smart mobility, cyber, 5G, digital health, and so many more. And as we celebrated Earth Week is what I'm choosing to call this, because it's not simply a day. We actually do this all year long with incredible companies like BluWave here in this ecosystem, serving that triple bottom line: economic, social, and environmental benefit, not just here for our community, but bringing those technologies to the world in collaboration with partners, including the speakers we have here today. So thank you for being with us. You will have the opportunity today to hear from 4 esteemed leaders paving the way in electricity, EV, and the innovation landscape, all while leveraging AI to support greater transitions to EV adoption, critical goal in our city, in our country, and in our world. This initiative is just one of our ways that we collaborate with BluWave-ai at Area X.0, our R&D facility. We're delighted to work in collaboration on BluWave's EV Everywhere project, together with Ottawa Hydro and the City of Ottawa. This project uses AI to create an online service for EV owners to help pool storage and charging capabilities of EV batteries to bridge demand and leverage cost-effective energy solutions. They are also a valued member of our Scale-Up platform, supported by our venture development team. Thank you all for coming, and with that, I'm pleased to reintroduce you to Dev Paul, founder and CEO of BluWave-ai, for opening remarks and to launch the event. Thank you for being with us.
I'd like to thank Sonia and her team at Invest Ottawa for everything that they do for the innovation ecosystem. As you can imagine, taking something from concept to, a going concern with products delivered around the world takes a whole ecosystem, takes a village to raise a child, and if you see a startup as a village, then you need the entire ecosystem of customers, partners, investors, and innovation hubs like Invest Ottawa to kind of get you to the point that you can go win in world markets. So with that, I'll just briefly introduce BluWave before I go into the panel. So BluWave-ai is based here in Ottawa, Canada, with operations around Canada and employees around the world. Our focus is to use AI to predict, optimize, control, and dispatch how renewable energy is used in utility grids and in electrified transportation. Our goal is to build the world's premier renewable energy and transport electrification AI company based here in Canada for world markets. And there will be companies who will do very well in this category in 5 to 10 years, because fundamentally, let's say you have a barbecue party going on in your backyard and you're trying to cook off your solar panels, and the solar energy is fluctuating because it's around 6 p.m. and sun's going down, you're going to turn on the gas or you're going to turn on the coal. And fundamentally, in industries and in grids, that's exactly what's happening. So you need to be able to predict when the renewable energy is coming. You need to optimize. You need to know where you're going to store it, and then how you're going to dispatch it. And all of this has to be automated going forward. And that's where some of the key capabilities that we're doing at BluWave with the talent, engineering talent here in Canada, will be instrumental for the world markets. So getting into the themes of our panel, one thing that I wanted to do before we get into the technology, market, and policy aspects of the panel is just actually introduce, before I introduce the panelists, actually introduce one of the themes that I think is fairly important. When I was a young officer in the Royal Canadian Air Force, my women classmates were the first fighter pilots, ship captains, and infantry soldiers. And I saw from the sidelines the challenges that they would have against an invisible system to advance in the armed forces and take on leadership roles. And that is a very difficult thing. Now in the industry, I'm in a position to try to help advance these invisible barriers in society. And therefore, on this panel, putting this panel together, I was thinking about the technical theme of the panel, the market theme, the policy theme. I was like, hang on, I know all these people who are actually generals of our electricity and energy industry, and they've gotten to where my classmates were trying to get to. So why don't we bring them up and they can talk about their expertise in the energy market, but closing off, we can also talk about some societal themes, assuming we have enough time. So with that, I'm going to have the panelists introduce themselves, introduce their organizations and their role and some of their thoughts. We have 10 minutes for that, so I will start first with Laurie Huff from Hydro Ottawa, then Jennifer from NR Canada, Maral Kasabian from IESO, and Susanna Zager from the Ontario Energy Board. So over to you, Laurie.
Thanks, Dev. So I am Laurie Huff with Hydro Ottawa. I am the Director of Distribution, Engineering, and Asset Management, which is a giant, long title to basically say that my responsibilities lies in the planning of the infrastructure and also determining what projects are required and what investments are required to make sure that we have the capacity for the future and for all of the fun stuff that's coming as a result of electrification. So Hydro Ottawa is the local distribution company within the City of Ottawa. We have around 350,000 customers who we do service on a daily basis. We also are the proud owners of a generation company, Portage Power, as an affiliate, as well as Envari Energy Services. And most recently, we also stood up EBU Networks, which is a company that does deliver dark fiber to customers in a B2B fashion within the City of Ottawa. So we're quite a dynamic company and do have a number of interesting and exciting projects going on beyond just the local distribution company. We really do strive to be a partner of first choice within the city to help our customers deliver on their energy goals and to be able to really provide that thought leadership towards the City of Ottawa and to help make a difference in creating a more sustainable future. So thanks to Dev for having me here today, and I will pass it over to Jen.
Hi, my name is Jen Hiscock, and I'm the Director of Electricity, Transportation, and Buildings Innovation within the Office of Energy Research and Development at Natural Resources Canada. So I think I win on the longest title. So NRCan is a large federal department responsible for a lot of the natural resources issues, so mining, minerals, forestry. We now have 3 energy sectors within Natural Resources Canada, though, because energy is such a core element when we talk about the transition that this economy has to make in the face of climate change and how to adapt and how to find areas of growth within that. So we are in a sector which looks at the national labs and the work that they're doing. So we manage a lot of the research that's done in partnership with corporations and innovators like yourselves. And we fund a lot of that work coming out of the Office of Energy R&D. We also fund work that is led by innovators who are utilities, who are academics, who are private sector, because we recognize that this sort of innovation and the partnership, the collaboration that we were hearing about before, needs to be led by different parts of the economy so that it really gets taken up and scaled by somebody who wants to own part of this solution. So my team, we have the electricity, the smart grid and renewable energy team. We have the transportation team, the buildings team. We now also have a battery team. And when you look kind of historically at the way government likes to manage things, they're typically, in their technology silos. But increasingly, we can't just talk about the grid problem in isolation of talking about the transportation issues, in isolation of the building issues. Increasingly, these projects that are coming forward to us are coming from municipalities, from communities that are saying, of course I want to increase my building energy efficiency, and also talk about how I can support electrification of transportation and figure out how I can participate more actively in the electricity system so that not only am I saving overall energy costs, but there's opportunities for revenue. So it's really coming back to us as, if this is what the projects are looking like, what does our team and our programs need to look like so that they can more effectively support these kind of integrated solutions? So that's a lot of what we're working with on our side.
Great. Thanks, Jen, and thanks, Steph, for having me. My name is Morale Kasabian. I am Senior Manager of Partnerships at the Independent Electricity System Operator, ISO. The ISO is the, hey Rayad. The ISO is the system operator for the province of Ontario. Our primary task is directing the operation of the transmission system, so the high voltage lines. We are the reliability coordinator, meaning we need to keep the lights on. And we are also the balancing authority for the province, which means we need to make sure that supply is balanced with demand of electricity every second of every day, 24/7. We have a number of other responsibilities, including administering the electricity market in Ontario, ensuring that we do our long-term planning to make sure that we have enough supply to meet demand in the long term, and forecasting demand 20 years out. We are also enabling conservation and demand management through our energy efficiency and demand management programs. We engage with stakeholders, Indigenous partners, as well as communities. And close to my heart is we enable innovation. And so my team is the Innovation Research and Development team. We administer 2 funds, so they're grant programs. One is the Grid Innovation Fund, $9.5 million per year annual grant program. The second is the Hydrogen Innovation Fund. It was launched in 2023 and has a funding envelope of $50 million. I would say really the purpose or the goal of the innovation team, of my team really, is to fund those projects so we gain learnings that answer the questions of today that inform the decisions of tomorrow. So I'm really excited to be on this panel with fellow panelists and looking forward to a lively discussion. Over to you, Susanna.
All right, thanks everyone. My name is Susanna Zagar, and I'm the CEO, Chief Executive Officer of the Ontario Energy Board, which is Ontario's energy regulator. So a really great job, and it's a pleasure to be here on this panel today with these women representing 3 other organizations with whom we partner regularly and with whom we see great value. For those of you outside of Ontario, I'll just say that we have a very interesting and complex system in Ontario, 60 electricity distributors and 2 natural gas distributors. And our territory in Ontario is more than 1 million square kilometers, so larger than the size of Texas, or for international folks, 3 times the size of the country of Germany. With all of the great weather that we have here in the province of Ontario, and we saw some of it this morning with snow here in Ottawa. For me, I've been a public-facing person for my entire life, 30 years. My North Star has been public service and providing value to the people of Ontario and to Canada, and to really seeing how we can punch above our weight in terms of the opportunities that are here in Canada. So really proud to be here today. Speaking of that, I also wanted to say that there's something I talk about regularly when I'm doing events like this or in private conversations, and that is that the Ontario Energy Board exists to protect the public from risk, but not from progress. And I think that's really important as you think of the position that the regulator takes looking forward around the issues of transition. I also want to say that I work with and for the sector, and it's my pleasure to be here today. So thanks, Dev.
Thank you, panelists. Really appreciate it, and devoting some time to talk to the audience, both here in Ottawa and around the world, on some of the challenges that we foresee in the Ontario economy and what your organizations are doing to look ahead, think ahead, put tech and market frameworks and policies in place to enable pieces of the energy transition. So with that, we'll go to the first question, and that question is for Susanna and Jennifer. So if we think about it, roughly every 250,000 EVs that we put on the road, and some of the folks in my team have done the math around this. My colleague Craig Downing, author of one of the recent white papers on EVs everywhere. Basically, it translates into $1 billion that stays in your own economy between using less oil for 20,000 kilometers a year of vehicles and using locally generated electricity. And that $1 billion that stays in your economy, it roughly applies to most economies around the world. So there's a generational opportunity to basically concentrate your economy's money locally rather than ship it off to oil-producing areas. So with that comes challenges, and I'd like to hear Susanna and Jennifer's thoughts on how grids and economies can get ready for these challenges. You know, Jennifer being from NR Canada and Susanna from the Ontario Energy Board, clearly they got the forward look. Companies like BluWave were on the ground floor, you know, building the widgets to make it happen, but we operate in their framework. So over to you. Susanna, would you like to start?
Yeah, thank you for that. You know, it's a really, really exciting time to be in Ontario and to be in Canada with respect to EVs. You know, massive, massive economic opportunity that's available for us. Mining, battery plants, EVs, there's so much going on. You cannot get up in the morning in Ontario and not see something happening in this area. You know, we're hearing right now about the Honda plant, you know, just this week, and the potential there for that. So there's so much going on. You really, this is the place to be if you want to talk about EVs and the excitement there. Our role as the independent economic regulator is really to help facilitate the integration of EVs and new types of connections within the electricity grid. And so we've got to be forward thinking, and that's a challenge, frankly, for regulators, because we're used to looking in the rearview mirror and seeing what happened in the past and how do we regulate for the past. The challenge created here is to look forward and see how we think about those sorts of things. So there's 3 things I wanted to mention here that we've done at the Ontario Energy Board that we see as really laying the groundwork and starting to see what the future looks like. One is our DER connections review, which we issued EV charging connections procedures last February. And that was really to provide the sector in Ontario with clarity. And we did this because they came to us and said, we need clarity, we need to know what we're doing. So we worked really hard with the sector to get that done. The second thing that we did is late last summer, we started to consolidate the advice that we'd been providing in Ontario to various entities who'd come to us. So we might have previously had a question from a certain entity, we'd answered that bilaterally, they'd gone on their way, they'd taken our advice. We'd done that over and over and over again, and we said, look, let's consolidate the advice we're providing bilaterally and create something where we're actually putting something on our website and having these conversations in a consolidated way to incent others to think about the art of the possible and not to just assume that the regulator will say no, but that the regulator will say how and work with the sector around that. And then the third thing I think that is really relevant, and it was mentioned by Sonia this morning, and maybe Jen's going to speak about it as well, and as well my colleague from the ISO, the Innovation Sandbox. So the Ontario Energy Board has the first Innovation Sandbox in Canada for an energy regulator, and we really saw that as an opportunity to get ready around regulatory guidance. BluWave and Hydro Ottawa came through that sandbox, and that's essentially why we're here today. So this is a perfect, really tangible example around how these connections get things done. Thank you.
Okay, over to you, Jen.
Yeah, thanks. I think the topic of how this lands locally is really important, because when we talk about the energy transition, there's a tendency for it to move to macro scales a lot. And we look at the entire grid in Canada, and then we take the current demand that is solved by fossil fuels, and then we say, okay, let's assume a certain percentage of that moves over to electricity. Therefore, how much does the grid need to grow? And that kind of simple math just isn't cutting it anymore. It really overestimates the amount of build-out that's required if you're assuming that everything has the same level of energy efficiency as they have in the past, and you're ignoring the advancements that we're seeing in technologies and the advancements that we can see from systems efficiency that can be leveraged when we're using these. So Susanna said DER, that's distributed energy resources, in case anybody's not in the jargon here. But from those distributed energy resources that are smart, that can respond to the signals that the grids are going to put out. So when we're looking specifically at EVs, we've been doing studies actively also with partners at Natural Resources Canada, and we're seeing that for the electricity system, we're going to see this challenge at the distribution level before we see it at the transmission level, just because of the capacity of the local lines. And so then the question starts to become, is it immediately an expansion planning that needs to respond to this, or is there ways that we can get a lot more out of the existing infrastructure that we already have in place? And so this is a really exciting opportunity for us to explore with our partners. And I mean, I work in an innovation shop. We fund innovation. I would say it feels like from the years that I've been in this space, there was a tendency for the industry and players to think that R&D and innovation was kind of this nice to have kind of fun play zone. Hopefully something works from it, and then we can bring it into our regular J job, like the real business. But now at this pace or this stage of the energy transition and these global goals towards 2050, leaving us only 26 years to get there, we're starting to realize that innovation isn't just a nice to have. Innovation is actually going to be your survival tool. And so it's interesting that you've got 4 organizations here that are really embracing innovation as a tool for progress and not a stall tactic for progress. It should never stop us from just deploying things that we know work already, but there's a lot of areas where we're starting to run into these kind of crunchy problems to figure out, okay, what is the business case that really works with this, the business model that works with this, how should we scale this up? These are important questions to answer, and an innovation approach can be a really effective way to start to quantify those numbers that we need to understand before we try and go big on something in a way that doesn't stall the things that we know already work well. And so you can see the sort of learning that has to happen locally with municipalities, with utilities, with developers in the private sector, and so that we can start to incorporate what we know works more quickly rather than requiring everybody to treat it like a pilot process. And that kind of accelerated learning has a lot of local benefit in terms of skills, training, and economic growth opportunities that just kind of develop around that sort of mindset of being able to learn faster, fail faster in safe ways. So I think we'll hear a little bit more about these kind of sandbox kind of approaches to figure out how can I experiment, prototype much quicker, learn much quicker, and then have that turn around into the new codified ways that we do business. So yeah, I think that's how you end up turning this into a local opportunity.
Okay, thanks, Jennifer. Jennifer was the policeman for Susanna with the comment of inside our company we have this. You shouldn't use acronyms. You should actually explain to people what it is. So we'll try to stick to that theme because we're all electricity propeller heads over here, and some people might not understand what we're talking about if we use acronyms. Electric vehicles, EV. Okay, so I'm off the hook. Just in case. All right. So we went from the folks who are looking at the future and looking at innovation, looking at policies, to next question is for people whose day job is to implement it. So Jennifer, we'll have Lori and Moral kind of answer this one, and going with the gross math. So if we, in my future perfect world, there'll be like 1 million EVs in Ontario. And in that world, we have to put out like 4 extra terawatt hours of electricity to cover these. And it represents roughly 3%, 4%, somewhere in that range of additional electricity use. And somehow this has to magically get from generators all the way down into our houses and in our companies and everything. It's not just EVs, right? There's kettles, there's heat pumps, there's all kinds of things that use electricity. So what are your thoughts on what we would need to do to accommodate all of this in the future? Laurie, do you want to go?
Sure.
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting because as a distributor, an electricity distributor for the last basically 100 years, I'd say the demand for electricity has remained pretty flat. It's declined since the 90s, and suddenly we're on this skyrocket curve upwards. And the way we've always planned for in our system in terms of what we are going to require for capacity has been the same old, where we basically talk to the city, make sure we understand where there's going to be new growth for developments. We partner, we talk with the larger commercial customers, get an understanding of what it is, and we go about our pace of slowly increasing capacity as it is required and in the small pockets where it is required. We are building a new station once every 10 years, maybe even less than that at one point in time. And suddenly now there's this massive demand for growth, and we need to understand what we need to do really quickly in order to ensure that we're able to continue to serve customers. And so we've really had to change our way of operating as an LDC and the way that we look at things. We're currently embarking on a 2050 study. It's actually wrapping up in order to understand exactly what the demand is going to look like by 2050 and what specifically the impacts at the distribution level will be. We're including things like heat pumps, EVs, all of the different transportation electrification, all of the fun things that everybody's aware of in terms of what's going on in innovation in the electrification space. And we're looking at basically it's like a 2 to 3 times demand growth that's going to be coming at us. But as Jen noted, we really don't want to have to just build the infrastructure blindly. We are needing to look for new and innovative ways of doing serving our customers, and we do need to look at ways to reduce the overall demand, especially as we push it over to the demand that comes onto the transmission system and the bulk system, because building those assets takes a long time, and it is complicated, and it's extremely expensive. And to be quite honest, we won't be able to keep up if we are only relying on that type of growth or that type of build out in order to serve the customers. So these projects that we're doing with EV Everywhere, with BluWave, with EV Everywhere, the projects that we're looking at and funding with NRCan and the space of innovation are extremely important, because what they're allowing us to do is find new ways to solve problems that don't require traditional wired solutions. The non-wired solutions are absolutely going to be the way of the future. They're going to serve a very strong purpose. Our regulator is a giant supporter of us looking for new and innovative ways of doing things. They truly have transformed the way that we have interacted with the regulator in order to find ways to solve these problems at a more rapid pace. I'm quite confident that this next funding that we're about to go into our 26 to 2030 rate application, which is we set our rates every 5 years. Within that space, we're going to be looking for more innovation funding, more ways of doing this type of work. more ways of solving problems, because it is the distributor is the one who is at the last mile to the customer's home, and I do agree that it is going to be the distributors who see the pain first, and they are the ones that are going to have to solve the problem. So it's a fun time. We've got all kinds of innovative and exciting things that we're working on, and
Okay.
looking forward to it.
Moral, you're going to be operating a system with more electrons flowing around. What are your thoughts on this topic?
Yeah, so I completely agree with Lori. It's all hands on deck, really. So from a system operator perspective, we are forecasting a 60% increase in demand over the next 25 years. 60%, that's huge. And that's primarily driven by economic and population growth, as well as electrification of the mining and steel sectors, and of course, EV adoption and the EV industry at large. In addition to that increased demand, we are also seeing a shift in the way electricity is consumed. And so what our forecasters are looking at is a system peak, Ontario shifting from being a summer peaking jurisdiction, which we are now, to a dual peaking jurisdiction, so peaking in the summer as well as the winter in 2030. And the peak demand is expected to be around 27 gigawatts by then. So that's a lot happening at the same time, increased demand and changing patterns of electricity usage. And so the ISO...
Moral, for context, if I could interrupt, for the audience, the current peak for Ontario is in what range? You mentioned 27 in the future, but now?
It's around 23-ish gigawatts, yeah.
Yeah.
Give or take. And so the ISO has a number of initiatives to address that. Number one, procurements, right? So over the past couple of years, we've gone out with procurements, and we continue to do so. Last year, I think it was, we announced over 700 megawatts of storage for Ontario. That's amongst the biggest procurements for storage in North America. Transmission, our planners are involved in bulk system planning as well as regional plans to ensure that we have enough transmission built out, reinforced across the province to ensure that electricity is generated and then can be delivered to its load centers. In addition to that, conservation and demand management continues to play a huge role, and will continue to do that over the next number of years. And then innovation, of course. So we have a number of things we're doing in innovation. Our Enabling Resources program is looking to enable things like distributed energy resources, or DERs, to enable them to participate in the wholesale market more fully. Specifically to EVs, and we talk about EV aggregations at the wholesale level, our latest Grid Innovation Fund, which was announced a couple weeks ago by the Provincial Minister of Energy, Minister Smith, is looking at electrification and demand management, and has one stream specifically focused on electric vehicles. And we're looking to see what type of flexibility these EV aggregations can provide both to the distribution network, as Lori was mentioning, they're the front lines, but also to the bulk electricity system. We have a number of projects that we're already funding, including the one with BluWave, Hydro Ottawa, and Invest Ottawa. And we've also tested EVs for their capabilities to provide grid services such as operating reserve and frequency regulation. So we're doing a lot. It's definitely all hands on deck, and it's an exciting time to be in the sector.
Thanks, Moral. One thing that I wanted to mention related to the entire energy transition and the EVs is, although the number isn't big now, this is the time to get ready for when it's bigger and put the building blocks in place. Obviously, all of these organizations, along with companies like BluWave, are trying to put those building blocks together so that we're all ready to roll when it's big. Back in 2016, there was a white paper that was written by someone at Natural Resources Canada, which I read. And at the time, I was in the AI industry, working on hyperscale cloud data center platforms with graphics processors and whatnot in the Open Compute project. And I read this white paper, and the last page or pages of the white paper were talking about data being generated into the electricity grid, and how to use the data to better manage aspects of the grid. So I read through the whole paper, and then I was like, I need to talk to the author of this paper. So I finally tracked down the author of the paper, who happens to be sitting here from NR Canada, and she gave me her time, and I explained, where I was coming from, and where I thought this alignment was to use AI and data to better utilize the assets in the grid. Subsequently, Jennifer introduced us to several players in the Canadian market, and we got the opportunity to implement some of the ideas. Specifically, the first AI-enabled electricity market dispatch was at Summerside Electric in PEI, and that was a direct introduction that she made to enable the innovation. So along those lines, the next question is for Laurie and Jennifer. Maybe Jennifer, you can start building off your concepts. Like 8 years ago, she wrote this, and now we're kind of doing it, also very well, in multiple places around the world. BluWave is doing it in multiple places around the world. So the ideas that she put in a white paper, you need like foot soldiers on the ground who are going to go and do it. So building from 2016, now we're 2024, what's in your mind on where we can take this at a national level and so forth? Yeah. And then after that, we'll get Laurie to answer how she's dealing with it at a distribution level.
Thanks, Deb. I think maybe you're, I don't know that I was really that clairvoyant, but I was at least just trying to talk about what it looked like we were seeing happening at the time. And I would say, yeah, when you start talking about the data that's flooding into the industry, now what we're able to get from the second generation of smart meters that we could even unlock from the first generation of smart meters, but we weren't necessarily doing that, it can quickly become pretty intimidating. And everybody's like, oh my gosh, and they start thinking of the hardware, and how am I going to transmit all this data, and then all these other kind of problems layer on with all of that. And I was talking earlier about how every organization engaged in this just has to figure out how to learn better and react better to what they've just learned. AI and data is very much part of that. And so what I'm hearing from the industry is that they're saying, it's not like all of this is coming back into the big central hub, which is the way I learned about computer programming when I was in undergrad, that kind of spaghetti system planning. It's not all coming back. It's all about distributed intelligence. And so it's not that it's your one mega control room that is keeping track of every little piece of data that is coming in at a second-by-second level. No, it's about having this kind of distributed intelligence out there on the grid, and then understanding what kind of parameters can they operate within in a way that we know is not going to compound and create unintentional other problems. But really, it's about being able to solve these things out there in the field with what's happening, and then figuring out it as an organization. Like there's a metaphor here for that sort of distributed intelligence and that sort of safe, fast, rapid learning in a way that the whole organism can really benefit from it. So I think there's some exciting opportunities there, and that kind of optimization that would allow when you're able to take something that's solving problems regionally, also solves problems that can manifest themselves on a macro scale. So you don't actually have to solve one massive long equation in one fell swoop. You're actually solving multiple little equations, and suddenly the problem is much easier to start to get into.
So with that, we'll go to Laurie, who would be solving it at an Ottawa level. But for context, when you drive by the street, sometimes you see this fence with all of these wires and transformers and everything. That's a substation. There's something like 90 of them around Ottawa. Yeah. So those service the neighborhoods and the streets. So it's like, okay, can some of this be pushed down to the substation level, the loop level, and so forth? So Laurie, what are your thoughts?
So data is key. And it's funny because there is so much data already available, and what we're grappling with right now is really how do we get access to that data AI has gone bananas in the last few years, and the things that we are now able to do and that we are doing within Hydro Ottawa using AI and working with companies like BluWave-ai are incredible. But what we need to be able to do, and what is the immediate issue right in front of us, is how do we get that data out from the field and back into our hands in a way that we can use it and make intelligent decisions using it. So some of the big pushes and the focus for us right now is smart meter deployment, increasing our smart meter deployment. Communication is a huge piece. So we break it down into kind of 3 categories that we're focusing on right now, which is observability, controllability, and flexibility. And so when you think of observability, that's us being able to get eyes into the field so that we know what the problems are and that we can get a really good understanding of what the problems are, when they're going to occur, and what's actually happening in real time, or as near real time as possible, in order to be able to get that information back to us so that we can control it or do anything with it. We need to have a really solid communication architecture in place, and that infrastructure is critical. And there's so many ways that we can go about doing it, and the build out in order to get access to that data is going to be something that we need to rapidly advance to ensure that we can. Because we have smart meters. Right now, we still call our smart meters every 24 hours using a traditional phone line, the copper wires with that sound that you used to hear in the 90s. That's still how we talk to our meters for the vast majority of the city, and we need to move away from that and get them onto LTE, get them onto fiber, get that information back into our hands so that we can make solid decisions with it. Once we have it in there, we also need to increase our flexibility with our customers. So we need to be able to understand what can we do dynamically with our customers so that we can load balance and we can make decisions to effectively manage the grid so that we're not fully dependent on just traditional wired solutions. So those are the 3 main spaces of focus for us. And in order to do that, and a lot of the stuff that we're trying to do, it requires innovation. It requires really forward thinking in terms of what types of projects we can do to test different ways of managing the grid, test different ways of doing stuff. So it's a mix of having the data and having the right people to work with that data in order to solve problems in new and innovative ways.
Let me convert this thought into something that we can relate to. So if I ask the audience, if you're driving 100 kilometers an hour on the highway and the car beside you is driving 100 an hour beside you on the highway, and I said, what speed do you predict that you'll be driving in 1 second from now in your neighbor? And you'll probably say, probably 100 maybe 101. If I say, what about 10 seconds from now? And you're like, okay, maybe I'll go up to 110 or slow down to 90. If I say, what are you going to be doing in a minute from now? You'll be like, oh, I have no idea. It depends on the traffic. So at the distribution level, you need to predict day ahead, like what's going to happen every hour, every 15 minutes, every 5 minutes tomorrow. Then intraday for the next 6-hour window, what's going to happen to the grid. Then 1 hour ahead, then 15 minutes ahead and 5 minutes ahead. So our team at BluWave-ai, we do this stuff all around the world. Way back when we brought up the AI-enabled energy dispatch for the city of Mumbai, India. And we did that all through, for them through the pandemic, thanks to introductions from people in Diana Cartwright's department at Global Affairs. So this is instrumental to actually manage the grids of the future. Last question, I'll ask Susanna and Maral to just rapid fire 1 minute each, if you don't mind. What are your thoughts on the policies, regulations, the frameworks that need to be looked at to kind of enable this energy transition, onboarding more EVs and so on? So Susanna?
Yeah, thanks for that. I think in 1 minute, I would say keep your eyes on the consumer. And you need regulators and system operators and national policy thinkers and local distributors who are actually looking thoughtfully about where consumers are taking this. That's the heart of the change that's happening. And even those of us in this room are watching on the live stream. Who could have predicted what was going to happen with EVs when we were thinking about things 5 or 10 years ago? And so we've got to keep really close to the consumer at all times, and we've got to work collaboratively to build solutions that are fit for purpose for them, not for us who sit back in the system in the positions that we have. So that's my 1 minute.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I completely agree. So integrating EVs into the system is a shared responsibility. collaboration between the OEB, the ISO, the distribution utilities is really critical in ensuring that we have that, moving the needle forward on integrating EVs into the system. I think that as distributors are really at the front lines, our common goal, I mean, across the board, is really to unlock the value that EVs can provide to the bulk electricity system as well as the distribution network. And so working closely with the utilities to understand what that transmission distribution coordination looks like so that we can safely, reliably rely on these resources to provide those services to the grid, while either the distribution network or the bulk electricity system is super important. And that's work that we're doing very closely, working with the LDCs as well as with the OEB and the ministry. So yeah, that's what I would say. Thanks so much, Dev.
Okay, thanks. Last question to the panelists. After that, just for time check, as we had a few technical difficulties engaging the live stream, we may have time for a couple of questions for the audience, but we'll see. So the last question comes to the social thematic aspects of where our industry is going and the opportunities for all types of people to take leadership roles. So obviously I reached out to our panelists who are women leaders in the industry. They've marched through from the trenches to leadership positions in their organizations. My question to you, and whatever commentary you'd like to share maybe from Susanna over to Lori, is what are the types of programs that your organization or industry can put into place to attract, recruit, and move young women through our industry so that they can take on leadership roles going forward? Because when you all started off, it was probably more difficult than what we all kind of need to take it to. So, Susanna?
Yeah, I'll kick off there. I think there's a real opportunity here in what's going on in the energy sector, and it's for us to bring diversity in all of its forms into the sector. We need everyone, everywhere, all the time. And I think I would encourage women to enter into the sector. We've got a great scholarship program that we partnered with Ontario Energy Network around that. There's a lot of things going on in the sector, but I would say really network in a way that's significant and be thoughtful about that. And to each and every one of us who are in positions of leadership and making decisions around hiring, around advancement, around recruitment, we really need to think about how we use diversity, equity, and inclusion as one of our superpowers. And I'm pleased to say that I see the Ontario Energy Board doing this. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely agree with Susanna. And we were just chatting that, she's the CEO of the Ontario Energy Board. Our CEO is also female, Leslie Gallinger. And there's a number of very powerful and great leaders that are kind of paving the way in Ontario in terms of the energy sector. And it hasn't always been like that, actually. And so this is a great time for females and everybody, actually, to get involved of all kind of different backgrounds. And what I would suggest is roll up your sleeves and just jump in. It's an exciting sector. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of opportunities. Get in there. You probably will like what you're doing. If you don't, you can always switch, and I guarantee you'll definitely learn something along the way, and you'll meet some great people.
Yeah, I'm privileged to be able to work with a lot of other women in the Office of Energy Research and Development. My boss is a woman. My boss's boss is a woman. I have many other women directors working in the office, and we also have a positive space ambassador. We have many more people who feel much more comfortable talking about gender diversity and having gender diverse members of the team. As Susanna mentioned, yeah, diversity really is a superpower, and so it's not a question about getting the person who scored the top mark on some test that somebody crafted that they thought might determine the best candidate for a job. Like a lot of these flaws are in the way that we write these tests themselves. And so instead, we really take it from who is qualified, and then now I have to look at my team and say, how am I going to create a high-performing team, which isn't always who happened to score the highest mark that day on this test that somebody wrote. So I think it really takes a much more progressive look at how you build high-performing individuals and high-performing teams.
Yeah, it's going to be hard to build on what all of these ladies have said because they've all pretty much nailed it. But so at Hydro Ottawa, we do have some really specific programs that we're focusing on in order to bring women in. I truly believe that in order for us to solve the problems that are in front of us, we need the biggest pool of diversity possible because we need all the different minds bringing all the different perspectives that they have and based on their backgrounds and upbringings and everything else. So at Hydro Ottawa, we do have, we partner with Algonquin College and we have the We Saved You a Seat program, which actually does save seats for females to come into the programs which are at the technical levels. We do hire a lot of technical trades folks, obviously, on the front lines. And that's one of our learning grounds. It's the place that you can really get the most understanding of how the whole distribution system works. And it's where we do grow a lot of our leaders from. So that's the first step is with the trades, Algonquin, We Saved You a Seat. We also do a lot of outreach with the local universities in order to look for the females that are out there and look for and try and attract females to come in to our organization. We are also working closely with a number of different programs for internationally trained individuals who bring a whole new world of perspective to us and working with our friends at the PEO to try and recognize their knowledge bases a little bit quicker, which is a bit of a challenge, but we are working on that as well. And then through that, we've also set corporate targets for diversity and for females to be in both our trades and technical, our engineering programs, as well as in the leadership programs. And we are seeing advancements on those numbers, and it is a focused effort from our executive perspective as well. So I think it's an important piece. It's very important to our corporation, and I get very excited whenever another female walks in the door, especially within my team. I have a number of other females as well that I'm very fortunate to work with, and I think it makes all the difference. So thank you, Deb, for having us all here today.
That person wrote that test on that day that you have to answer now. Before I got into Royal Military College, we had that 80-question test in 30 minutes. And then out of my recruit class of 250, there were 25 women who passed that test in 1983, and 3 minorities, me being one of them. But yeah, exactly. It was like some predetermined test. So, you know, we got to look past that. And a living example, Laurie talked about internationally trained engineers. I got an outreach from the CEO of Tata Power in Mumbai who said, hey, one of my staff is trained as a distribution engineer and she's immigrating to Canada. Could you make some introductions? So I reached out to Laurie's boss, Guillaume Paradis. I said, I have no clue about this person other than the CEO of Tata Power is hired her and used her at his utility. And then I guess she's with you all now, like 3 years later.
Fantastic. Yeah, she's
so
a high-performing
now I hear
member of
that
our
she's
team, yeah.
fantastic. So the program that Hydro Ottawa put in place clearly works. We are a bit over. Rayad, you're not allowed asking any questions because you know all the answers. If anyone from the audience has any questions, and also, you know, we do have a live stream that's out there, but I think we'll take questions from the room first. There's one in the second row. And I'll repeat your question so everyone can hear.
Firstly, thank you very much for BluWave for doing this. Oh, thank you. Yeah, as I was saying, thank you so much for BluWave for doing this. It does open our minds for sure. And also I applaud this wonderful new generals of our of this space. Great, including Ms. Shori who opened the marks. So thank you all very much. My one quick question would be, actually, if we have time to, but one quick question. Okay. One quick question is, what is the topmost risk that you face as you do your planning? Because I heard someone say, learn faster and fail safer. So what would be the topmost risk that you would have? And if in that space, you can answer my second question would be, how do we do the EV batteries and disposal, the exit strategy of that space? So just very simple questions. Thank you.
From my perspective, our biggest risk is to try and do things the same way we've always done them and try and expect that we can continue to function the way that we always had in such a linear manner and without thinking of everything now as an ecosystem and trying to make sure that we're always looking for new and innovative approaches. I think that's probably our biggest risk, is to not evolve and change in the way we're thinking.
I would say communication is not a risk, but definitely something that needs to be improved when all systems are moving so fast. We're going through the energy transition, communicating within internally so that we are ensuring that the left arm is talking to the right, but also externally so that we're working together and collaborating and ensuring a orderly energy transition for the benefit of Ontarians.
For me, I think the biggest risk is assuming that one organization or one entity has all the answers. And I think that the way we'll solve problems most effectively and the way we'll reach our full potential is to work collaboratively.
All right, thanks everybody. My daughter's here learning to code, so she's looking for an internship this summer. My very brief question is, you spoke about the ubiquity of data. My experience in the private sector is that's not the case, and we collect data and it just sits on a hard drive and it's not accessible. But appreciating that there's so many privacy issues, and I totally get it. But what can we do to make this data available to the private sector so that we can leverage innovators in the private sector in this all hands on deck scenario?
That's a really great question. I think that the main piece that I would echo your sentiments on is the privacy piece is a huge piece. But I do think it's through collaborations with companies like BluWave-ai and through these innovation funds that are being generated through the OEB, through NRCan. These are the spaces where, as utilities, we get a chance to test out different ways of working and learning how we can collaborate with private industry. That's where we really do spend a lot of our time now on an innovation perspective, is because we have data that's available. We can't just hand it over, obviously. There's the privacy concerns. I know we have Green Button, which was recently launched, and that's really in response to some of the questions that were coming from private industry in terms of how you can access that data. But in a lot of cases, there's market spaces that need to be filled in order to solve problems, and through these innovation sandboxes and these different types of projects is really one of the great ways I think that we can actually provide access to the data. I don't know, Susanna, if you have other thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I really like it. And I think there's a tendency, I'll speak for regulators, to want to collect data and then hoard it, for lack of a better term. And so we've been working really hard in Ontario at the Energy Board to make the data that we collect available to others in a format that they can use it and slice and dice it in a way that actually helps make decisions and is really consumer and customer focused. And I think that's really important there. Safeguards, of course, privacy, all those sorts of things. But I think, again, what I said in the answer to the question about risk is this thinking that you've got to hold on to something yourselves. I think the collaborative value of data is really where the power to harness change exists. Thanks for the question.
I'll just add to that, actually relating to this challenge, when we started BluWave AI, what we did was we started building a database of data from all around the world, weather feeds, electricity data. We call it Atlas. We've been building it up so that when we start a new deployment, if we go to Berlin or Yokohama or whatever, we already have like a whole background set of data and so forth. So I feel like I'm running a talk show here, and I have no Oprah training, but there's a question from back there, so I'm going to take the mic back to him.
So thanks, Steph. I have a quick question. It's a specific question about EVs, right? We all consider EVs as an extra load to the system, but at the same time, EVs actually represent a huge distributed energy storage. Right? They're all essentially batteries on wheels. And as we know, most of our EVs, they're sitting on streets and they're doing nothing, right? And we drive them for 10 minutes. And so I have a question. Do you and there is this concept of EV, like vehicle to load or vehicle to grid, where it can actually tap into the energy of the battery. So manufacturers have been very hesitant to, enable that or feature in EVs. And I wonder if any one of your organizations can actually consider the storage in the EVs as a potential in your planning. Would you embrace something like this, or are we just having millions of EVs sitting or batteries sitting around doing nothing all the time?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're going to be able to. So we've been funding vehicle-to-grid projects under a program that will be wrapping actually this year. So I'm excited to be able to crawl all over these completion reports and understand what they've learned. I think the hesitation around this has been multifaceted from the OEMs making the vehicles. There was real concerns about degradation on the battery itself and what the experience is from the EV owner perspective. But we've got real titans in the battery industry in Canada. The Jeff Dawn lab that's out at Dalhousie University on East Coast of Canada. If you've heard him talking about the million-mile battery, we're hoping to be able to take battery performance to a level where your car is going to fall apart before you start to lose range on your battery, and we're not going to be so fussed about being able to leverage it. And I feel like from a grid perspective, it's not just like, oh, can we use these assets? It's like, no, I'm counting on it. We have to be able to use these assets when they get to a certain level. And that's going to come through residential charging, I think, more than public charging. So some of the efforts that we're doing is trying to work with our codes and standards committees to understand how we can make residential charging far more accessible for Canadians in Canada, because not only is that your business case for EVs, like you make the most savings if you're charging at home, not if you're charging publicly. But also that unlocks the potential to be able to use this as a distributed energy resource for the grid. So we're trying to figure out the best way, the most efficient way to be able to make this more affordable, both for customers and for the grid operators.
Yeah.
Maral, 30 seconds.
Yeah, I completely agree with Jen. We're also looking at that. I think there's also a place for vehicle to home, vehicle to building, not only to reduce demand, but as that temporary power supply to enhance reliability and resiliency of the homeowner or building owner, and also vehicle to grid, direct injection back into the grid, just the distribution network to support the distribution network and also defer infrastructure upgrades and costs. We're definitely looking at that. That's what Grid Innovation Fund 2024 is all about. So if you're interested, check that out. But 9.4 million vehicles, I think, in Ontario, internal combustion and electric, I think in 2022 or 3. So imagine if all of those were converted, the 7-kilowatt battery on average, or 10 kilowatt, that's a huge amount of capacity. So definitely thinking about it.
That's my perfect world, Maral. All 9 million, but or 9.4. I'll take one, take 500K. I'd like to thank all the panelists for taking their time, sharing their insights here with us today. It's starting off from reading like a couple of lines in a 2016 white paper to sitting here like 8 years from then going, okay, it's happening. And having their insights to share with the audience, both here and around the world, it's really exciting. I think it's exciting for the Blue Wavers, our colleagues, investors, partners, to hear this type of thing. And now, we got the job of implementing it and making it happen. And all of you are important enablers for the whole market, for companies like us. So. Just want, if the audience, if you want to give a cheer for our panelists, and we'll wrap it up with that. The stream will be online at some point if anyone wants to hear a replay or forward to your colleagues, and just use it as a educational asset. Thank you.